Before I start this video, I want to first just remind us of the symbolism of the houses and the order they go in. So I'm going to talk about the 12th house and identity. And I think it's very interesting that the 12th house is right between the 11th house of group identity, of group membership, belonging to something outside of your immediate family, outside of your other experiences. You choose kind of where to go with the 11th house and who you want to engage with in terms of like people who have similar ideas, people who have similar hobbies or intellectual pursuits. Then when you go to the first house, it is of self, it is assertion, it is knowledge of self. Now, of course, it's going to matter what's in that house, what aspects planets make, but the 12th is cloaked between these two houses. And the 12th house, and we're going to talk a little bit about suns in the 12th house and some other energy, but the 12th in between these houses has a very different role because the 12th is where the identity can be a little bit more fluid. It is not concentrated. You have some people who they make their experience in this world may be feeling like they're 1 foot in the spiritual world, 1 foot in the earthly world, and having to wear many hats or show many faces in terms of identity. So I did want to start the video off by symbolically talking about the 11, 12, 1, the order, and how 12 is actually in between. It's almost like people are in this group membership in the 11th house, right? But the 12th is where we have to go to soul search, where we have to actually form a sense of understanding of our purpose, maybe before, and again, in the order, first is self, right? So first is more of that instinct that I talk a lot about when I talk about the ascendant and it being on the cusp of the first house. But we also can look at this as a journey, as a continuum. Instead of just looking at it, number one, that's where we're going to start. We can symbolically look at the fact of like, well, before we even get to this consciousness of the first house, we also have to have some type of soul experience. We also maybe have to disconnect a little bit to fully be alone with ourselves. And we know the 12th house can be associated traditionally with isolation. So I did want to frame that before I jumped into the rest of this video.
Let's talk about this. The 12th house and the alter ego. Okay, so especially sun in the 12th house, people are likely to have an alter ego. Now, let me explain what I mean. You might be like, wait, I don't have an alter ego. You might have a way in which you present to the world that is not the way that you really think that you are, right? 12th house people tend to, especially sun, 12th house, tend to sometimes feel like who you really are is not what the world sees. And who you really are is what you know at your core, or what you are alone. But what you are in the world is not the same. That doesn't necessarily make you fake. It means you gravitate towards following through with a certain persona that the world sees. But deep down, when you are away from the world, you have a greater sense of who you are. And there's definitely some spiritual components to that, right? At the core, some of you may know, like, there's more to life. There's more to this. This who I am now is not who I always was. Maybe you're like, my soul's the same, but my body's not the same. But a lot of people who are like into reincarnation and things like that. So a lot of times 12th house people end up with this dual personality, not multiple personalities. I don't mean that. I mean, you might have a way in which you present at work or in the world around you or in your community. But when you have more choice, you are a different person. When you're around certain people, you are a very different person. It is a person who appears very conservative. They dress very conservatively. They seem really prim and proper, but they're really into horror, and they go to horror festivals, and they're really into they're into traveling to different places and traveling to haunted places, and they're really into scary stuff. They might have some Scorpio on their chart, but that is an example, or a person who seems like, clean cut, but then they're a part of like a motorcycle club, and like they're a biker, right? Like when you have 12 house placements, there's always going to be a part of you that's a little hidden, and it's not always a conscious thing. It's not that you're trying to be different or fake. It is simply there's a part of you that you feel you don't want to be controlled by the world. And so that other part of you, now at its worst, those placements can become hidden in ways in which people are, of course, there's different types of people in the world. You could have people who are doing bad things behind the scenes. But at its best, it simply just means there's another part of you. And you may feel more comfortable exhibiting that part of you alone or with certain people. Some famous examples. Okay, at one point, Katy Perry called herself Beth Terry. David Bowie had some alter egos. Ziggy Stardust. Aladdin, Sloan, or Sane, Sane, I think. And then there was another one, the Thin White Duke or something like that. Think of like even George Michael. His real name was Georgius, and I can't pronounce it. I'll put it here. His full name, he was part Greek, so he had a very Greek name, but his stage name was George Michael. Okay. George W. Bush. A lot of people referred to him as W. That was because to differentiate him from his father, George Bush Sr., who was George H.W. Bush. Okay, which is interesting because George W. Bush George W. Bush is a Cancer son. Think about Cancer, the family, right? So his nickname came from the family, like his distinguishing him between his father. So I found that really interesting. Even with like Mercury, people who sometimes have Mercury in the 12th house as well, there could be something interesting around that nickname. So I'm gonna talk about that. So just to close out the alter ego, people with this sun energy, it is where you shine the most is in lanes where you kind of create the mode for yourself. So you could have a person who's, you're good in terms of your family, you're responsible, you do good in school, all that, but you're always going to have a lane in which there's something in which you want to be something that is nothing to do with the rules in which society and earthly down things have decided for you. So it's not surprising, obviously, with people who are in entertainment business to have alter egos, but you as a non-famous person also may have an alter ego. You might not call yourself anything, but you might realize there's like a whole different, like people don't see you the way that you see you. And it's not always a bad thing. It just can mean like they don't really know you. If you're especially sun in the 12th house, people don't really know you. But it's also sometimes you want to keep that precious, that to yourself. Like I don't want people to fully know everything about me, or I don't want people to control that part of me. I don't want, because once you let people know who you are, then they're going to put you in this box, and then they're going to, right? Then they're going to try to control this. Remember, the 12th house is a fluid house. This is a house that deals with the imagination. There was the unconscious. There's no rules in the 12th house. We're dealing with spiritualism. We're dealing with dimensions. We're dealing with, we're dealing with the spiritual world, karma. We're dealing with all these things that can be disassociated. Now, can you sometimes see people that are disassociated? Yes. At its extreme, a person could have 12th house placements or sun in the 12th house, and there's a complete disconnect from reality. Again, you would probably see that. You would see other placements maybe that would help explain how they're disconnected from reality. So sometimes it can be extreme, where a person present, like I said, like sometimes that could be a bad thing, especially if you look up some people who are notorious for crimes, where like they present as like good on the outside, but really secretly there's something else, so that can come up as well. I did want to frame that. It's not always a good thing that people have this alter ego, but the alter ego is usually this sense, and it could be from some people, it's the imagination, especially Mercury. People have Mercury in there. If they have Neptune in that 12th house with Mercury or any Neptune influence, it could be imagination. In your mind, you have a very different life, or you wish you could be something different, or you think and dream about being something different. Now, again, I'll talk that in another video, how to tap into your imagination, but that's the thing, like you might feel you are a different person. And as long as it's not affecting you negatively and you're not having any extreme mental health issues, it's not a bad thing. It just means you're just, the world has you in the way that it has you. And then you have your own thing. I think eventually you get to a place where you're not afraid to show what that is. Eventually you get to that place where it's like, hey, this is what I am, join me or not join me, but I'm not changing who I am. And so what I mean by that is like, I'm someone where, and my profession, I'm very diligent about learning the ropes to what I do in my real profession. But then I do astrology and I do spiritual readings, and right, it's kind of can seem as two very distinct things, right? Now, again, I do think no matter what I do in life, it's always going to be in some way guiding, coaching, helping people see their potential, regardless of whether it's spiritual work or my career. But and some people their spiritual work is their career. For me, this is something I do, I do spiritual practices every day, but in terms of business or videos and content, that is that's just a side thing that I do. But the point that I'm making is there's very two distinct parts of me, and they function just fine. It's not a problem. But let's also talk about nicknames. People with 12th house energy, especially if you have Mercury, I would say suns as well. And maybe some other placements. If you resonate with this video and you have other placements in the 12th house, please let me know. But nicknames, you might find a lot people give you nicknames, and it's because, remember, the 12th house is not a literal house. The 12th house is so connected to things that are distorted in a way. And so sometimes you might find like your given name is not what you go by. Sometimes you can see this through first house as well, because first house is identity. Mercury and maybe first house, your name, what people call you might be different. People might give you nicknames similar to your name, but it's not your name, right? That is sometimes a 12th house thing. You might realize, like, that's why I said what you are in the world may not always be what you're seen as. And it doesn't have to mean the nicknames are bad. I'm not talking about bullying, but I'm talking about there's always like 12th house people, like there's always this kind of disconnect from the thing that is literal about you. Does that make sense? There's always something, and it doesn't have to be negative, but like it's disconnected, or it's something that is not taken literally. It's not taken for what it is. It is something that has to be changed. It's something that's altered, but you might like it. You might be a person like, yeah, I don't like my first name. Everybody calls me this, right? Everybody calls me that. So anytime you have 12th house placements, there's always going to be something about you when you're at who you are, identity, sun house, especially, that can change. That's why I said, like, even the alter ego is something in this setting, you're this, in this setting, you're that. It's always something that you can change, or something that is easily adaptable in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so nicknames are also a huge thing that can be sometimes seen through 12th house energy of people who have personal planets there. Or if you have Venus, it could sometimes be like, let's say you have Venus trine Mercury trine Venus or something like that. Could be your partner gives you a nickname and that sticks, right? Or it can be family. Like, it's always going to be something with 12th house energy where you have some part of you that is changed, altered in some way, shape, or form. But it kind of can be interesting because it gives you additional layers. And I know that the 12th house is often described by some people as so limiting and so horrible and so bad, but it's like, yes, there are problems with the 12th house if you disassociate from your life. There are problems with the 12th house if you are lost. If you don't know what your purpose is, if you are too secluded, if you are someone who completely disconnects from reality, that can be a problem, right? But, in my experience, the 12th house has not been bad. It's just actually tapping into it has helped me connect better to my spiritual self. And so I do want to always help people understand that that is a potential of the 12th house. It is not all bad things. Are there some difficulties? For sure. But I do think there are ways to heal yourself and also be more conscious of yourself. So that way you are really tapping into spirituality in a way that helps your real life. Not just you getting lost in the sauce and your dreams and alternate realities and stuff. But it's like, well, how do I support the reality that I'm in right now? Okay. So that's just something I noticed about the 12th house after doing chart readings, and also just like really seeing how there's this theme here, right? People who create this other side of themselves, and that other side of yourself is you, right? The alter ego is a part of you. It's typically a part of you that the world wouldn't accept. But if you're a celebrity, it's easier. If you're an actor, it's easier to do that, right? Because it's expected in entertainment that you can have this alter ego and you could be fun, you could switch around. When you're just, regular person, you're not in the limelight. It's sometimes harder to have those alter egos. It's harder to express certain parts of yourself. But some people find that there's a way to have that balance and still be able to like really be true to who you are, but also in a way learn to really, accept yourself. And I think that's sometimes difficult for people, is to accept the part of themselves that they feel can't easily come out. And you learn, hopefully with time, how to do those things, which is why I think astrology is so helpful for that topic.